Acolytes, and welcome back to another reading wrap-up. This one is so late. I'm so sorry. I did not want to set up my filming stuff, so yeah. That was the one and only excuse, is that I didn't want to have to drag all of my stuff out to my dining room table and set up my camera and my lights and everything. So sorry. I'm sorry this one's so late, but it's my September reading wrap up. So if you want to skip straight to the reviews, you can go to like this timestamp right here. I have some good reviews for you this month, including some arcs that I'm very excited that I got to read. So yeah, go check that out. Otherwise, we're gonna get started with our as usual, starting with the reading tracker page and going from there. I already lined out my stuff this month. So we should be able to save some time, which is always great. And I am mostly sure about this calendar. I think I've got it correctly labeled here. Not too bad. That is the correct amount of days, so I'm thinking maybe we got this calendar correct. Oh, I thought I miscapitalized one of the days of the week, but no, I didn't. I read 7 books this month, which is about my average, I would say. I aim to read 7 books a month. Now, it has been a bit, so I don't actually remember what books I read. I think I know, but I want to make sure I get it right. Did I really? Wow. Apparently, I took the whole first half of September off from reading. I didn't finish a book until September 15th. I did read a lot of arcs this month. I think I read 3. Oh, it might have been 1 in August and 2 in September. I like getting arcs, but I feel like such an a-hole because I've rated a lot of the arcs that I've read pretty low. And it's not because of anything that I think I could let pass, right? Like usually I let poor grammar or poor formatting pass because it's like, oh yeah, you're not done yet. It's usually, I just don't think the plots are very good. And I feel so bad. I think I actually rated my arcs, at least one of my arcs this month, pretty well. I will say, just to keep you intrigued, that one of the books I read this month was an arc, and it was quite possibly the first book I've ever read in my entire life that I've hated. I will get into it. I don't generally hate books, even if they're bad, even if I rate them 1 star. Sometimes I have like a little bit of like a, well, that was a waste of my time, you know? But genuinely, I don't hate books. And I think I might have hated this one. I feel like quite bad about it. But at the same time, I don't, because I'm like, it was not good. I hated it. I'll get into it later. I was apparently reading a lot of books overlapping this month. It took me longer than average to finish books this month, it seems. Because I usually finish books within 1 to 3 days, but it seems like multiple books I was reading for around a week each. A confusing month to be sure. But, you know, it's tracked. I don't know if you guys can see that bring in a little bit, but I was reading, I usually don't read more than 1 book at a time. I usually pick up something and finish it so that I can have all of my attention. But it looks like on the 15th, I was reading 3 books at the same time. On the 16th, I was reading 3 books at the same time. On the 12th, I was reading 2. On the 22nd, I was reading 2. On the 25th, I was reading 2. So I was all over the place for September. So now I want to glue in my book clubs for September. And you guys are going to be so proud of me for the first time in like 5 months. I attended a book club meeting. One of the books I read was a book club book. It just so happened to get in from the library just in time for book club. So I read it and I actually attended book club. Guys, are you proud of me? Are you proud of me? It's so sad because out of the 3 book clubs I joined this year, I think only one of them is still running. So I think Spooky Friends, they either kicked me out or they disbanded the club. And I think they disbanded the club because I can't find their club anymore. I do have my trusty glue thing. Yoink. you know what? I haven't revealed the theme for this month yet. Maybe I'll make you wait. Maybe I'll make you wait for it. Would you guys want to join a book club that I was running? I've been thinking about starting my own because I think it would be a really fun time, honestly. The book club is actually listed as one of my Patreon rewards, but obviously I can't run it until there's like at least 4 people on that tier of the Patreon. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe I'll start it off as like a, you know, just an open thing. And if we get a lot of members, maybe I'll switch it to like every other month it's an open thing. So like every other month everybody could join, and then every other month, so like January everybody could join, and then February it would be an exclusive month, and March everybody could join, and April it would be an exclusive month. Does that sound like horrible? Does that sound like something you guys would be interested in? Just let me know, actually comment about that, because I would love to start a book club, because I feel like mine are so inconsistent that I've joined. Thrillers by the Book Club is actually pretty good, but if I was running my own I would definitely attend book club every month. We're doing yes and no, so that's a Y and an N. Oh my gosh. What in the absolute heck with my stutter? And an N. Look, it's hard to say, all right? It's difficult to pronounce. I don't want to hear any judgments from the likes of you. And I actually get to check yes. Wabam. Don't mind my handwriting. Look, it's a little whack, but that's okay. It's allowed to look like that. I'm allowed to have slightly bad handwriting. It's not a crime. If this guy could stop revving his engine in front of my apartment building. Come on, man. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that, man. You know, there's just so many different hobbies. And I feel like me and that guy are on very opposite ends of the hobby spectrum. My hobby includes journaling about the books I've read, which is one of the nerdiest hobbies I could possibly imagine. And his hobby includes revving his motorcycle in the middle of the day in the parking lot. And that's okay, you know? Everybody's a unique human being. But man, we really are on opposite ends of the coolness spectrum, aren't we? What was on my TBR this month? It's just gonna be The Legend of Sleepy, because I didn't leave myself enough space. That looks like all of the data completed. Are we ready for the theme reveal, finally? It's apples. Apples are a pretty September-y theme, right? I got an apple pattern, I got some plaid, I've got a whole bunch of leaves. Probably way too many leaves, but you know, I've got some apple blossoms, more leaves. What can I say? I cut out a lot of leaves this month. Way too many. Why did I cut out so many leaves? What in the hell? Did I go into a trance? I don't remember cutting out this many leaves. How did that happen? A tiny little apple pattern. Another small image of apples. I was just out of my mind, apparently. A slightly larger image of a basket. Guys, there's more leaves in here. Is that all my stuff? No, I've got stickers. Where are my apple stickers? But none of these stickers look like apples. And that leads to the greatest question of all. Where did I hide my apple stickers? If they're not with the rest of my— Get off of me! Static electricity. If they're not with the rest of my stickers, where would I have hid my apple stickers? Tell me why I searched the whole damn house for these stickers. But I found them. And I have no doubt I'm gonna use all of them. We got apples and apples and apples. Why did I print so many leaves? Getting post-leaf regret. Post-leaf clarity, some might say. I just, you know, I had a vision in the past. And I'm not seeing it now, but I had it. I had the vision. I gotta do a lot of stamps. Hold on to your stamps. Hiya! Wow. Look at how badly they cut this stamp. Look at how close to the edge it is. That's terrible. Low quality. It's maybe a little off center, but it's a long word. I don't think I did too bad for how long the word is. Snipper time. Snip. All right, now usually I do a little decorative element on either side here. So what have I got for that? Look at my previous spreads to gain some inspiration. Yes. Very, very previous, very inspiration. I think that needs like a little bit of background something to make it pop off the page. Some of this, I think. But we don't need like a whole corner, just enough to like give the illusion. Quick battery change. We've made a little bit of progress here. I think we're starting to fill the space nicely. The leaves are helping. Past me was she was onto something. She was all about it. I kind of want a little stamp in that corner, but I don't know if I have anything apple themed. I have a little windmill. So now I've just got a bit of space sort of up here at the top and along here on the sides that I usually fill with something. Let's see if we're looking at, yeah, I filled it there, then I semi-filled it there. So I do have a little bit of space on the sides that would be nice to get filled. I have this one with pears on it. I think it's so funny that I have pears. I'm gonna use them and just pretend that they're apples. It doesn't need to be a lot, just enough to add a little bit of color down the sides there. I used to do the same thing on that every time. I had the like transparent gold leaf tape that I would put down there every time, and then I ran out of that stuff and I haven't got more. A little look-see there. It definitely needs something along the side here, but it's probably just gonna be maybe like one of these apple textures or something. Or maybe some of these flowers. It's a little irritating because I think all of the flowers sort of lean towards that direction. See, all of them are kind of leaning that way, except these guys. That looks like it's got a tiny little bit of flower sticking out from it. That's cute. Stuff would stop sticking to my hands. I'd be quite pleased. So if I just stuck the bee stamp in the center, maybe that would appease me. Maybe that would make me happy. Yeah, that is pretty cute. Do we want one more bee? Of course we do. We love bees. We'll put him up here. Hiya! He is one of my favorite stamps that I have, so I don't mind using him on quite a few spreads. He's been around the last couple spreads. A leaf? Question mark? Do we want a leaf there? Yeah, we do. I feel like that's a good reading tracker page. I feel like it looks nice. I feel like it's in line with how the previous ones looked. So this is this month. This is last month. I feel like it's pretty good. I'm pleased with this. Next up, we are doing all of the review pages. So I am going to hop into VoiceOver to do those, just because it's easier than trying to make things and also talk at the same time. So I'll see you in VoiceOver, and I will be back live in front of you here on camera after those review pages for the stats page and the collage. Welcome to the voiceover segment. Let's talk about some books. Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. This is a story about Anna and Reed, a young couple in New York who are struggling hard after a complicated birth of their first child, Charlie. The birth left Anna paralyzed, and she's not coping well with it. Luckily, they seem to have gotten a break when they're offered a lottery for a very, very nice apartment in a wonderful historic building. But when strange things begin to happen, Reed is a little bit more dismissive of Anna, and their daughter seems to be changing. She seems to be unsettled, and Anna is finding herself resenting her baby even more than she already did. As Reed learns more about the building, Anna feels like they're falling in deeper and deeper danger, but she feels like she can't get them out in her current condition. Will she be able to save her child and her marriage? Reviewers I watched on TikTok and other social media were absolutely raving about this book, and I loved Mary by Nat Cassidy. I gave Mary a full 5 stars. It was one of the best books I've read all year, and I was hearing from others that Nestlings was even better. So I went into this book with extremely high expectations, and then they weren't met. Maybe if I had been more neutral going in, I would have liked Nestlings more, but I just couldn't seem to get into this one. With Mary, I couldn't put the book down, and I read the entire thing in one sitting. With Nestlings, I kept becoming distracted and slightly frustrated with the more mundane issues that were at the center of the novel. Tension felt like it was escalating far too slowly, and a vast majority of that came from Reed and Anna having trouble in their marriage. I liked both of them as characters, and I specifically like the idea of Anna as a disabled horror protagonist. I don't think we see that very often, and Cassidy did an excellent job keeping in mind the elevated danger towards her in regards to that vulnerability. She's in a wheelchair, and so she can't just run away. She has less of a chance to fight back against able-bodied people. She can't operate the elevator at her building without running into the elevator operator. So she can't get down the building because the only other option is the stairs, you know? There were several layers of that danger. Primarily the physical of not being able to run away, but also the sociological inability to run away. Anna can't support her and her child on their own, and she doesn't have a very good social system to fall back on. So without Reed, she really is trapped. Speaking of Reed, he drove me crazy. I know it was on purpose, and this is maybe a quirk of mine, but I simply could not stop focusing on the Home Depot thing. Anna works part-time as a voice actor for books, and during their move, the moving men broke the door of her booth, so she hasn't been able to do her job and record audiobooks. And Reed is supposed to go to Home Depot and get a part to fix her booth, and he just doesn't. Over and over and over. I was so incredibly angry at Reed for most of the book. It got to the point where I was actively hoping he would die because he refused to go to Home Depot and help his disabled wife perform her job. I think it was completely intentional. Firstly, as a disregard of Anna's needs, and then intentionally as like a slight against her. He was like displaying his resentment against her by not getting this part for her. But I couldn't stop focusing on it. I don't know if it really was too pervasive in the story, or if I'm just really sensitive to that. But it drove me crazy. I kept having to put the book down, like every couple chapters, and turn to my boyfriend and say, he still hasn't gone to Home Depot. I would have divorced him for that. I would have. Also, Reed seems very dumb. I know he's like very seduced by the residents at the Deptford building, but he acknowledges that Camilla, one of the Deptford residents, has to be in her 80s based off the movies that she's been in. But supposedly Camilla has a daughter in her 20s? That would mean that she had her daughter in her late 50s, early 60s, which is not really possible. So I don't know if that's also intentional, that Reed is just ignoring the red flags, but I was like, how are you this dumb? How are you like, oh yeah, she's 80 and has a daughter in her 20s? Sure, yeah, that seems normal. The Deptford was an interesting setting, though I think I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see more of it. Most of the time is spent in Anna and Reed's apartment, so we only see a very few areas of the building in detail. The courtyard was quite interesting, but also difficult to picture. It was much larger and more densely planted than I was envisioning, so I found it a little confusing. Anna at one point sort of gets lost in the woods there, and I was thinking, like, it's a courtyard, how big could it be? So I don't know if there's something supernatural going on there, or if I just don't understand what it's supposed to look like. The marble staircase that's brought up a lot was also an interesting centerpiece, but I think I had a little trouble picturing where exactly it was. In my mind, it was like off to the side of the apartment landing, but that can't be true. It's gotta be like in the center, because it's a centerpiece, right? So the elevators must be off to the side. I don't know. I think the building was atmospheric and creepy, but I had a lot of trouble bringing it to my mind. I like Cassidy's writing. I do. I think it's descriptive and interesting, and I think the characters are well described and all that good stuff. But the biggest sin of this novel is that it didn't scare me. I am someone who is very afraid of all things creepy and crawly. I am petrified of spiders and mosquitoes and wasps and especially cockroaches. This should have been a slam dunk to frighten or gross out someone like me, and it just wasn't. It started off quite strong with someone in the very first chapter eating a whole cockroach, and I was like, oh, that's gross. Yeah, I can't wait to see what's in the rest of the book. But then there was nothing for like a really long time. There wasn't any escalation in the bug thing until we were at the actual monstrous part of things. And then it was too alien to really frighten me because at that point it's not a bug, right? It's something different. I was quite disappointed that I wasn't scared or grossed out because I really should have been. I liked the endings for a lot of the characters. I think Reed ended up where he should have been, and while I feel a bit conflicted about Anna's ending, I understand it. I appreciated the thematic through lines around motherhood in the novel, though it feels a little like Anna regressed in regards to her feelings around Charlie. I felt like Georgia got left hanging a little bit. I kept expecting to see at least some level of resolution to her character, and while she was briefly seen as a background character and we can assume we know what happened to her, I would have expected Anna to have more of a reactive moment to where Georgia ended up, you know? Nestlings was fine overall. I don't know if it's just because I don't really vibe with the creepy children horror trope, but I did not get the hype for this one. Maybe you would enjoy it more, so I would recommend if you're someone who enjoys atmospheric horror with compelling themes. I gave Nestlings 3.5 stars. The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Mariana receives a call from her niece, Zoe, who is a student at Cambridge University, telling her that one of her close friends has been murdered. Mariana is sure she knows who's done it. Edward Fosca, a charismatic Greek tragedy professor at the university. He's adored by staff and students, but particularly by a secret society of female students known as the Maidens. There is no evidence that Edward Fosca is a murderer, but Mariana sets out to prove it anyway, and risks her entire career in the process, as well as her life. Just as I had heard good things with Nestlings, I had mostly heard bad things about the Maidens. I had hopes for the book, though, which was interesting because I had heard mostly bad things. I'd heard it was like mostly a 2-star book. But again, I don't think those hopes manifested. The book started off well enough. I was listening to it as an audiobook, and I was drawn in by the dark academia cult vibe that the synopsis was describing. However, I was terribly disappointed with how much we actually learned about the Maidens as a group. They worship Persephone and Demeter, the goddesses of life and death. Kind of. Persephone isn't exactly the goddess of death, but, you know, kind of. And as such, they often speak about like a ritual that will place one upon the threshold to experience both. And that's very interesting. But we find out what the ritual is, and it's very disappointing. It's not spooky. It wasn't particularly interesting. I didn't find that it was very atmospheric when it was described. And part of that is the issue of the protagonist. So, as mentioned, Fosca is their professor of Greek tragedy, and he also sponsors their little secret society, their club. He's suspected of being the killer because, of course he is. The girls who are killed are part of the Maidens, and each girl received a card in ancient Greek from their killer. Fosca is also charming and attractive, though there are a lot of rumors about him possibly sleeping with the Maidens. The Maidens just don't really have any presence. They're generally disliked by the student body, even though these women who are a part of the group are successful and powerful. So you would expect it to be like extremely coveted, you would expect it to be like they're kind of untouchable, that kind of thing. Almost Mean Girls-esque. I don't know. They're all rich, pretty girls, and yet the student body just despises them. They think they're weird, and they kind of think they're sluts because they think they're sleeping with Professor Fosca. Unfortunately, they come across as a group of lovesick losers who are following him around because they think he's hot. Mariana doesn't even really get to interact with them that much. She speaks to their members twice, and neither time is anything too important from my memory. So, Mariana is our main character. She's a therapist, and I think she's a horrible therapist. And unfortunately, she's also our main detective in the plot, and I think she's a terrible detective. She's truly horrible. She immediately jumps to a conclusion about who the killer is, and she sticks to it, not even considering other possibilities. Like, not at all. Mariana also gives off really strange vibes. Like, she specifically describes herself as plain and ugly because she's got like Greek heritage, so she's dark skinned, she's got thick hair, she doesn't have dainty features, you know, that kind of thing. So she describes herself as ugly and is like, no guy ever likes me. But then almost every single man we hear about throughout the story is completely enamored with her. All of them are in love with her. All of them want to take her out on a date. Henry, Fosca, Fred, Sebastian. It's delusional. Just because she didn't have a boyfriend in high school, she thinks she's hideous. It's like super weird. I don't know. It's like almost that YA protagonist thing where it's like, I'm so plain, and then she has like 1,000 love interests. It was weird, and I didn't like it. I was kind of okay with her as a character, but I wasn't on board with her investigation. It felt like she spent so much time spinning in circles and not progressing her investigation at all. How many times did she try to use the same evidence to come to the same conclusion and got shot down? My primary issue with the book is I think the twist didn't really make any sense. So I'm probably gonna have to go into spoilers here. Spoiler alert, spoiler warning. The killer ends up being Mariana's niece, Zoe, acting under the posthumous orders of Mariana's late husband, Sebastian. However, I don't understand how Sebastian knew Fosca. Zoe was killing the Maidens to frame Professor Fosca, all in the service of eventually killing Mariana and getting all of her money. I was under the impression that both Mariana and Sebastian had no idea who Fosca was, as I think the narrative implies that when they visited Cambridge, they always went together, and Mariana had no idea who he was at the start of the story. Fosca seems to be new. I don't know if I misunderstood Zoe's explanation, but it sounded like she was following Sebastian's instructions directly and not making plans of her own. I suppose that Zoe is not a freshman, so it's possible that all of this was planned when Zoe first started school and was telling Sebastian about it. Then he decided through her telling him about the Maidens and Fosca the plan. It's just kind of ridiculous. I also find it hard to believe that Sebastian had such a horrible traumatic childhood and he was only ever completely stable around Mariana. I'm not saying that a therapist would have been able to automatically detect something like that, but there were really no signs whatsoever. I find that highly improbable. Sebastian's death also baffled me. I kept expecting the twist to be that like he wasn't really dead, but no, he actually did just drown. It's likely that the weather wasn't bad when he decided to swim and the storm picked up quickly, but in my head I couldn't shake that he went swimming in a storm and drowned because he's stupid. I liked that the chapters from the killer's perspective were narrated with a male voice in the audiobook. It really fooled me for the killer to be Zoe then. I had my suspicions at first because she was acting really strangely, but when we got the first of the killer's chapters, it wiped away that suspicion. So the twist did actually catch me off guard a little because I was reading the audiobook. I also thought the little integration of Theo in this story was so corny. I didn't even pick up on it being a reference to the silent patient until Theo specifically mentioned the female lead in that book. It's not like that conversation was really important to the story or anything, and it's kind of weird that these books are set in the same universe. I kind of smiled when I heard the reference, but I also think it was totally superfluous. And I feel like maybe it was Acolytes trying to remind you that like, I wrote this really good book that you liked after a string of like pretty mid novels. The writing was fine. The atmosphere was fine. I was hoping for something a little more atmospheric in my dark academia books. I can't even really picture any of the locations Mariana was in throughout the story because none of them felt particularly distinct or notable. I didn't like this one. I liked it more than The Fury, if only because the narrator of that book is the single most annoying man I have ever heard in my entire life. I did think the mystery of The Fury was more engaging though, and the twist was better executed. Acolytes officially has more misses than hits for me now. Hopefully he can win me back with his next one. We'll see. I'm not giving up on him yet. I really did like The Silent Patient. I gave The Maidens 2.5 stars. The Wolf Tree by Laura McCluskey. This story is about two detective inspectors, George Lennox and Richie Stewart, going to a remote island. A Scottish island with a name I can't pronounce. Eileen Eder? It's super barren, it's super remote, and the people on that island are not very friendly to mainlanders. But when there's a suspicious suicide on the island, the detective inspectors think that there might be more to it than what meets the eye. The community is tiny and insular, and everybody seems nervous to talk to them. Maybe that has something to do with the omnipresent priest who inserts himself into every interview interview. George can just sense that there's something wrong. She can also hear howling. Wolves howling, even though there shouldn't be any wolves on the island. So this is an ARC and advanced reader copy, so thank you to Penguin Book Putnam and NetGalley for the advanced copy. I love reading ARCs. I feel very conflicted about the wolf tree. My main conflict with this novel is that the first third is extremely slow and quite boring. The descriptions of the Isle are excellent, and the atmosphere is super vivid and tangible. However, so many pages at the beginning are just spent with the detectives questioning the townspeople. We see every single interview on page, and unfortunately, I don't remember any of the information learned being that relevant to the central mystery. It was like reading a grocery list, honestly. You know, like, what's your name? My name is blah blah blah. How old are you? I'm this age. Do you live here alone? No, I live with this person. What's their age? Their age is this. Did you know the victim? Yes, I knew the victim. How did you know the victim? I knew the victim like this. Did you talk to the victim? Did he seem sad? I don't know, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, I'm so sick of reading this conversation over and over and over. But I do think the book got steadily better and better and better until by the end, I was feeling like it was almost a 5-star book, like a 4.5. The tension was really good. It was fantastic, especially in regards to the priest on the island. He was so authoritative. It was quite uncomfortable. Every scene he was in was made uncomfortable by his presence. And then the cold, wet, hopeless atmosphere felt like it was sinking into my bones. The mystery started to build, not necessarily in relation to the main death, but instead in relation to the whole island. It's frustrating that I can't give The Wolf Tree 4.5 stars because of how much I had to slog through the beginning. I think the characters were pretty interesting. George is a tough woman, and it's understandable that she would be that way. I like her relationship with her partner Richie, and I thought they had great chemistry, great banter. I definitely bought it. I do feel a little unsatisfied with where the end of the story left their relationship. I feel like they had a conflict that was never fully resolved. The reader is constantly told that George acts without thinking and doesn't call for backup, and I believe we're meant to think that this is a negative thing. However, I don't believe that this is resolved. George doesn't really change that much by the end of the story, and it makes her feel a little static and frustrating as a character. I liked her as a detective, though, and I think her determination made her a lot more likable to me. I did predict the ending, partially, but I still enjoyed it so much. The central mystery was whether or not Alan committed suicide, and if he didn't, who killed him. The way that part of the plot resolved did surprise me a little bit. I'd be curious to reread the novel to see if there were clues that I missed. I'm not sure the reader could have figured out the culprit, which always bugs me in a mystery, but I can't say if they could or couldn't. The clues were very subtle. As I've said, the writing and atmosphere were excellent. Island Idar sounds like such a strange place to be, and the desolation of the island only feels more uncomfortable with the townsfolk being so hostile. I also loved the quote-unquote wolf tree itself. What a cool image. I was so engaged when the book got to that part of the mystery. It got me. I loved it. Mwah! 10 out of 10 chef's kiss. I would recommend the wolf tree, but be warned that it is a very slow start. If you can push through to the 40% mark, I think you'll have a great time soaking in the atmosphere and feeling the creeping tension along your spine. If you can push through, I think you'll love the ending. The Wolf Tree by Laura McCluskey releases on February 11th, 2025. I would recommend you check it out. I genuinely think it was pretty good. I gave The Wolf Tree 3.5 stars. We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kleber. Young gay couple Charlie and Eve are house flippers, and they got a killer deal on an old house in a beautiful neighborhood. They're debating whether or not to restore it or tear it down when one day they get a knock on the door. It's a strange man with his wife and 3 children, and he claims that he had lived there years ago, and he asks if it's okay if he showed his kids around. Eve is a massive people pleaser, so she lets them inside. But as soon as they enter, weird things start happening, and this family can't seem to take the hint that Eve wants them out of the house. What is really going on with this family? Okay, so this isn't a book. I know, weird thing to say when I'm telling you about a book. I should say it's not just a book. This is one part of a massive ARG called the Old House Archive. There's a subreddit lots of lore and codes, some of which have not been solved because I think people have said they're part of the next book. There's multimedia mysteries. There is a big ARG going on around this book, but unfortunately, the wider ARG makes this a less complete experience. There are so many story threads left dangling because they're made to be part of a larger mystery. From Thomas, the dad of the family, to the old house, to the basement tunnel. Most of this lore has no relevance to the overall story of We Used to Live Here, and as such it feels a bit like a waste of time and pages. The lore of this world is clearly very deep, but we have access to almost none of it. I've heard rumors that the author might do a sequel, and if that happens, hopefully we'll get some answers. I feel like there is a college course's worth of information in this book, and by reading it I just got the syllabus. So I feel like I've missed out on so much because I'm not a part of the overall ARG. Eve, as mentioned, is the main character, and she is so unlikable, or at the very least, she's quite stupid. She's just such an incredible doormat. She allows this random family inside her home, and then they stay for dinner, and then they stay overnight, and then the next morning they're making breakfast in her kitchen? The audacity! I can't I can't believe she didn't kick them out. I understand that she's a very anxious person, but I would have called the police hours ago. Also, I don't think the relationship between Eve and Charlie got enough focus for me to really care about them. I feel like I don't even really have a solid grasp on who Charlie is. So when things begin to change, I didn't really get any signs from Charlie that things were changing. That relationship seems like the core of Eve's motivations, so it would have been nice to have me care about it a little more. I think that the first half is also quite slow, but I enjoyed the tension that was slowly building. I was very engaged with the second half, though. I'm not usually a fan of stories that deal with multiple dimensions and timelines. Events built at a good pace, and the tension mounted quickly near the end. The horror was definitely more on the subtle side, but by the end it had built up to be quite creepy. I unfortunately really hated the ending. My book club discussed whether we believed the events were actually happening, or if it was all a delusion from Eve. I hate the it was all in her head interpretation of the end, and I refuse to believe it. Ending the novel the way he did just really rubs me the wrong way. It almost feels like the easiest and laziest answer. It makes sense in context, but I'm so sick of the woman was crazy the whole time as the ending for thriller and horror novels, It's just, My primary complaint, though, is just how much was left unresolved. What happened to Allison? Was Charlie in the basement real? What was Thomas staring at in the basement? What's the deal with the old man at the old house? Was it a future version of Thomas? Is Thomas the one responsible for the events of the story, or is it the old house? What was Thomas crying about when he was sleepwalking? What is the hospital under the house? Who's leaving the Morse code? What do the symbols mean? Etc., etc. I left the book completely unsatisfied. I wouldn't recommend if you're the type of reader who needs answers, but I would recommend if you were an ARG fan. I gave We Used to Live Here 3 stars. I still liked the story at its core, but man, was I frustrated that I was so unsatisfied. A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. Simon and Gregor are unusual gentlemen. They live in a giant greenhouse, and Gregor, as a botanist, is loving that. But in the basement, Simon has his taxidermy workshop. These guys are weird, and they like to keep themselves away from most of society. Gregor acquires a very interesting plant, a strange fungus, which shows some signs of intellect, and he wants to create intelligent life from plant matter. He and Simon work together to build a person out of plants and a body that they dig up. And they bring her to life. I would firstly like to say that I started out reading this as an audiobook and I had to DNF it. I think Gregor's voice in the audiobook is very irritating and over-exaggerated. I finished the rest of the story as an ebook, but I wouldn't recommend the audiobook. I find myself wanting to like A Botanical Daughter more than I did. I think the premise is very sweet and interesting. The story is really about 2 gay men trying to create a family for themselves in a world that would never allow it. This is a historical fiction novel. So these 2 guys, they can't be gay in public, they can't get married, and they cannot have kids. It's also pretty obviously a Frankenstein retelling, and I think it succeeds okay in that department. I do have some complaints. As mentioned, the characters are Gregor, a mad botanist, Simon, a repressed taxidermist, Jenny, who is their grieving young housemaid, and Chloe, our Frankenstein's monster. The relationship between Gregor and Simon is very sweet, and I appreciate their dynamic. As an established couple, they know each other's emotions and routines to the point where they're basically an old married couple. They care for each other, are tender towards each other, and they support each other when they know the rest of the world would not. I find the central theme a little confusing. Simon is initially against the creation of Chloe, believing her to be an abomination against nature, but he helps Gregor create her anyway because he loves his partner. Gregor then convinces Simon to love Chloe as their daughter. It's a genuinely sweet scene where Simon comes to understand that Gregor feels so alone in the world because he has no family left, so he wants to create his own. Simon then throws himself fully into loving and raising their daughter, but after a violent event, Gregor begins to distance himself as a parent. I find this also somewhat understandable. I think it's engaging to witness how the men slowly exchange positions. Simon is also liberated from his repression through loving his daughter. At the end of the story, though, Simon seemingly reverts back to his previous position and tells Chloe that he's not her father. I found that very confusing. I just didn't understand it within the context of the story. Is Simon saying this because of what he witnessed happening between Chloe and Jenny? The descriptions even mention that Simon's rigidity returns to him when he's confronted by Chloe's actions. At the end, though, Gregor and Simon call Chloe their daughter, even though her form isn't the same as it was before. It seems much more like the final version of Chloe was made from Gregor's skill and knowledge more than Simon's. She's less of a combined effort than the original Chloe was. It's confusing. I don't know, maybe someone smarter than me knows. I really loved the descriptions and the atmosphere of this novel. The greenhouse was a well-described, vivid environment. Chloe's descriptions were also amazing, especially because the author described how she was growing and changing so well. Chloe was never static in her descriptions, but she was also never really human, and you can never forget it based off the descriptions that the author puts forward. I do think the writing was a little twee. I'm trying to think of the correct word. I wouldn't say it was overly distracting, but often the writing felt so quirky that it was almost a little cringeworthy. I still think the author did an excellent job with creating an atmosphere and building relationships between the characters. The style just wasn't my favorite. Jenny and Chloe's relationship is very strange and almost toxic. I'm really curious about what the author was trying to say with that relationship, especially within the context of this being a Frankenstein retelling. In the original Frankenstein story by Mary Shelley, the monster only becomes violent when he is rejected by society, and he only haunts Dr. Frankenstein because he craves love. Chloe, on the other hand, is loved in one form or another from the moment she's made. This story instead implies that she is inherently dangerous because of the mycelium that is her brain. It presents as a fact that if Chloe were to roam free, the mycelium would, by its very nature, be unable to resist usurping everything around it, and this is ultimately proven correct. So while the author is playing with the Frankenstein mold, I don't believe they've created as strong of a theme. I thought the story was going to end differently, but I can appreciate how it ended. It was definitely a bit of a bittersweet ending. I don't think that personally this is my favorite way the author could have ended the story. Where Chloe and Jenny ended up as characters both has poetic beauty to it as well as thematic confusion, unfortunately. I'm also not sure what can really be said about Gregor and Simon's character development. I can see more development from Simon, but for all of the emotions Gregor went through, I don't believe I have a solid grasp on what his arc actually was. The gore and horror in this book were surprisingly good, though I will say for the most part it's pretty calm, with only a few spikes of pretty intense horror. If you appreciate a gothic gay horror story, I would recommend. It's not a long read, but I would say it's a pretty cozy one. I gave A Botanical Daughter 3 stars. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Ichabod Crane is a school teacher, and he has come to the glen of Sleepy Hollow. The young Katerina catches his eye, and he begins to try to court her, but local boy Brom Bones won't let that happen. Ichabod Crane has a terrifying encounter with the Headless Horseman that might just make him disappear without a trace. I think a lot of people have heard of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's the story of the Headless Horseman, you know? The story itself, though, I've never actually read. It was very short, only 40-ish pages long, and it was fine. I wouldn't describe it as like an amazing classic or anything like that. In fact, I would describe it as like kind of boring. It's written as a letter. The whole story is framed as a letter, so there's not like grand descriptions of what's happening. There's no dialogue between the characters, and a surprising amount of the page count is taken up by the author describing food over and over. He describes the food that Katerina's father grows, and he describes the food that's at the party, and he describes the food that Ichabod eats at their family's house, and it's just over and over and over descriptions of food. And like, I love food as much as the next person, but goddamn, you know, it's a lot of food description. I will say that it's understandable that the thing that comes out of this story more often than not is the Headless Horseman, because he is the most interesting part, of course. Also, I would like to say that within the context of the story, the Headless Horseman does not exist. Like, he's not real. It's extremely obvious that Brom Bones is the Headless Horseman. It's made entirely obvious that Brom dressed up as the Headless Horseman and killed Ichabod Crane because Brom wanted to marry Katerina. I don't feel bad spoiling this book. It's like 1,000 years old or whatever, so. But yeah, the Headless Horseman canonically does not exist within the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's just Brom. That's pretty much all I have to say about this book. It's hard to talk about classics. Everybody has said everything already. Anyway, I gave it 2 stars. It's fine. It's a fine little read, but I wouldn't say it's particularly spooky or anything. Coup de Grace by Sophia Ajram. Vicken is going to kill himself. He's going to go to the St. Lawrence River in Montreal and throw himself into the water and drown. But when he steps off the subway, he finds himself in a subway station that never seems to end. It's claustrophobic, it's dark, and there seems to be strange things prowling through it. With the exit nowhere in sight, Vicken doesn't know how long he'll be able to keep walking, but he has to do it. He has to find a reason to live. This is another arc. Thank you to Titan Books and NetGalley for an advanced copy of Coup de Grace. Guys, I've never hated a book before. I know maybe it sounds like I have. If you've been following me for a bit and you've listened to my book reviews, maybe it sounds like I've hated books before, but I never really have. I've given books that I've considered bad 1 star. I've hated certain plot points or characters or writing styles. I have never, in my life, I need to emphasize this, I have never, in my life, had an experience like the one I had reading Coup de Grace. I need to actually give you a spoiler warning right up front. I'm going to talk about this book in depth because I don't want you to read it. I'm serious. I think you shouldn't read this book. So I'm going to tell you what happens. I would also like to pop a major trigger warning right here at the top. Talking about suicide, talking about self-harm. Alright, this book is the most overwritten, gimmicky, self-indulgent garbage that I have ever read in my entire life. I like weird books. I like books that are experimental. I like books that are considered overwritten. I enjoy Mona Awad, as you guys know, even though her style is stunningly dense and verbose. I loved reading Chelsea G. Summers, though her character in A Certain Hunger was wordy. I'm reading Margaret Atwood's The Robber Bride right now, and man, she writes a lot. But this book, good lord, I have never seen a writing style that evokes such word salad. It didn't feel stylistic. It read like the author wrote their sentence and then put every single word through a thesaurus. It was so overwritten that it was genuinely difficult for me to figure out what was happening sometimes. I understand that the confusion and the surrealism is the point, but there were many times where I had to wind back several pages to figure out what was happening. It just ruined a lot of the tension that was building. For example, at one point, someone falls over a railing and onto the concrete below. It's described in such a way that I was certain that this person was dead. It's described like they fell into the Grand Canyon. That's how deep this pit was. However, the next chapter started with that person having a fractured leg and no other mentioned injuries, and I was baffled. The main character, Vicken, is also just so completely unlikable. Vicken hopped on the subway to take himself to the beach and drown. The in-between that he ends up in seems to be a place for people who are considering suicide to be trapped and suffer forever for their choice. It becomes extremely obvious, like seriously, the author just straight up spells it out, that this endless, impossible subway station is depression. Vicken is clinically depressed. I think in some ways the author does an interesting job expressing how depression manifests, and how people who are treatment resistant can become very frustrated. However, in doing so, the author, through Vicken, categorically dismisses medication and therapy as a whole. I hate that for obvious reasons. Vicken meets another person while he's in the tunnels, a woman he calls Pashmina. Pashmina is here because she has practically incurable cancer, a 3% survival chance. She didn't want to wither away slowly and in pain, so she wanted to end things on her own terms. Because of her suicidal intention, she ends up in the Hell Dimension with Vicken, and she has the most visceral, graphic death in the whole story. I'm wondering, what is the lesson here? I'm wondering what the author could be possibly trying to say. Why is it better, more compassionate, to make this woman suffer through a painful cancer that is slowly killing her? What did she do to deserve being in the tunnels? Additionally, Vicken compares his depression to Pashmina's cancer. As someone with depression, oh my god, what are you even talking about? I understand the comparison on a surface level. Yes, both can make you feel hopeless, and yes, sometimes both are incurable. But are you kidding me? Comparing depression to cancer, one of the worst things that could ever happen to a person, the big C, cancer? It's so self-indulgent. I feel the same way about the depiction of self-harm in Coup de Grace. It's so self-indulgent. If you have ever self-harmed or had thoughts of self-harming, seriously, do not read this book for your own safety. There's an author's note at the beginning of the book that states that the book is about suicide, but there are no trigger warnings for the amount and extent of self-harm in the book. It's extremely graphic, okay? It's somewhat understandable within the context of the story and the metaphor, but the whole time I was just struck with how gleeful it felt. Like the author was pissed off and was trying to shock and offend others. It was horrible. This is a cosmic horror novel, and there are some conventions of that genre. We don't really learn anything about the tunnels. We don't learn what creatures are living there or what they really do to people who get stuck. We don't learn about the people in the elevator or the room full of beetles or the flesh tunnel. Yes, I said flesh tunnel. This is completely fine. It's a real staple of the cosmic horror genre. It's something too strange, too big, too impossible to understand, so the protagonist doesn't understand it. In a way, I think the genre is perfect to explore feelings of depression and hopelessness. I will say that sometimes it felt like the author was throwing anything at the wall to see what stuck. For example, the aforementioned elevator. After walking for days or weeks or years, Vicken comes across an elevator, and the author explains to us what the elevator game is. She explains all the steps and what's supposed to happen at each step, and then Vicken plays the elevator game. It's difficult to say that nothing happens because nothing at all happens in the entire book. There is some sort of layer of metaphor here and maybe a peek into Vicken's past, but I wouldn't say it's creepy or memorable. There's also a fake out the end here, though I don't know if it's a fake out or one of the many endings of this book. Oh, did I not mention that there are many endings to this book? You cannot imagine my rage when I am pushing and shoving my way through this dense nightmare of a novel, and then suddenly it turns into a choose-your-own-adventure story. I hate that gimmick, first of all, and secondly, the author hates you for not choosing the right path in the choose-your-own-adventure. Seriously, every single storyline except the correct one sees Vicken mocking the reader directly. Oh, you want Vicken to escape the tunnel? He berates you for thinking that's even possible. Oh, you want Vicken to end it all and be in peace? He berates you for wanting people to be miserable. Oh, you want Vicken to choose? He berates you for putting this on his shoulders. He's such a terrible, nasty, irritating character. You get to pick your ending, kind of. There's only one ending that the author actually wants you to pick, and I can't believe this, but it's the "a significant other will fix my depression" route. Yes, a person in your life who loves you makes it easier for you to love yourself. I'm just really irritated that the solution to getting out of the tunnels, getting out of your metaphorical depression, is a man. What kind of message is that? Oh my god. I will say, the gore and horror in this book is pretty good at times. I was engaged when our characters discovered a horrifying part of the tunnel made from the flesh of everyone who had given up there. I wanted to read more. Again, Pashmina's death was completely horrifying. It was some of the most intense gore I've read outside of the extreme horror genre. There's just so little of it in favor of going on and on about how horrible Vicken is feeling. I hated this book. I hated it with a fiery passion. I understand the metaphor. I understand the conventions of the genre. I understand that not every book has to have a good main character or a positive moral, but when your book has no plot, bad writing, an annoying main character, and a bad moral, there is nothing left to enjoy. Coup de Grace is out now. Don't buy it. Don't waste your money. I gave Coup de Grace half a star. Back to me in the studio. Okay, so now that we've got all of these review pages filled in, we are going to do our lovely collage at the front of the book here. Ooh, it's getting thick. I'm really worried it's gonna fall apart. I have a plan for next year. If I could get this, there we go, glue. My plan for next year is to use a spiral bound notebook. So even if it gets really thick, it won't wreck the binding like it's doing with this one. Can you see that? Let me zoom in for you. Look at that. Yeah. It might survive. It might just survive. All right, so the first thing we should probably do should be our little monthly tag thing. According to this, it should be right here-ish. So let me mark that with my pencil. Right there. Is that correct? Perfect. Excellent, in fact. Next year I might use plastic tabs because those get real folded up. They're only supposed to be a small indicator, but you know, they get wrinkly. Where's my apples? There they are. So this is gonna be our center image for this month, this lovely apple photo. But we almost always do a little bit of this plaid or some kind of pattern up in the corner first. So let's do that. I'm gonna hold on to this because I'm gonna use it for stuff. I just don't like wasting too much of it because it's going to be underneath the large image. Because these are transparent, I can't necessarily put them on top of anything too dark or they get a little bit lost. So we're going to try and maintain contrast. I think I'm going to lay this down. I always regret doing this because I lay down the like big piece and then I peel it up like 40 million times to add stuff underneath it. So, damn it! I swiped my apple stickers off the table again. Rah. Arr. I'm so angry. Roar. Are you guys excited to get an extra long reading wrap up next month? Because I've read a lot of books this month so far. I've read 10, but I'm aiming for 11 by the end of the month. Everything's bordering on like a little bit too green. Don't mind me shedding all over my journal. I just do that. I just shed sometimes, okay? It's not embarrassing. You're embarrassed by it, not me. Everything I have is also vertical, which is kind of tough. That's kind of interesting, right? And it makes the sticker stand out a little more. Maybe we'll do that then. I need to put the centerpiece across the top, and I am not excited for that because I have to stamp out every single letter of September again, which is a pain in the a-hole. This guy right along the edge. I think he'd look good there. And we get the stem of the apple, which is the best part, of course. The most visually interesting part, not the best part to eat. I'm not insane. I don't eat the stems of apples, all right? I'm not out of my mind. So this one is going to be a bit bigger than the others because September is a very long month title. Oh no, I did it at the wrong angle. It's fine. You can't even tell. There's like a tiny little sliver of white up there where I missed a bit, but that's fine. That wasn't so bad. September, yeah, I spelled it right. I think we're almost done, but I'm not quite sure. I think that's our collage done. What do we think? Do we like? I feel like it looks pretty good. I feel like this is a really well-balanced one. Last page is our stats page, and then we're gonna go do all of our challenges and stuff at the front of the book. On this first page, I almost always do the same layout for my stats page every single time. So it'll be books read, pages read, average length, genre, then down here it'll be format and where I got them. I always struggle to decorate the stats pages. And it's usually because like I'm pretty much out of supplies at that point, but I feel like I have a lot of supplies this time. So I don't know if it'll be easier or if it's just like the stats page is hard to decorate because of the amount of information on it. That's our books read and pages read. Let's make sure we get the average length thing in before I do too much other decorating. Oh wait, no. I have to glue in the genre thing first. Where's my snippo? There it is. This guy right in the center. Ooh, maybe. No, can't be. This guy right in the center. Yes, exactly. On top of one and below the other. Yes, except I might cut out this apple. Yeah, I know it's overlapping those categories a bit, but I didn't read anything in those categories, so it doesn't matter. Plus you can still read through the sticker. Pros and cons to them being slightly transparent, I suppose. Okay, so I think we're done decorating this page. Now I just need to fill in the information. So I read 7 books this month. As is pretty typical for me, I would say I average reading about 7 books a month. 1,871 pages, which I feel like is lower than usual. I'm not exactly surprised because Coup de Grace and specifically Legend of Sleepy Hollow are gonna really bring down that average page count. So I would guess it's probably somewhere in the like 290 range for averages. 267 pages on average. So it did bring down my average quite a lot. So that's this page done. Now we just have to do our backside stats page, which is usually a little bit easier because I think there's less stuff on this page. So starting off at the top, we have our best and worst of the month. Our best is Nestlings and our worst is Coup de Grace. And then we have our ratings. And then at the bottom, we just have a notes section. So it should look something like this with notes down at the bottom. Easy peasy, definitely not difficult. We'll have like some tea stained paper and maybe a little bit of, I don't actually know if I have any of the text paper left. My battery is totally gonna run out. Come on now, stick. Stick, you wench. I think that's possibly my worst rated book of the entire year so far. And I think for good reason. I didn't think I was gonna find something that beat out the House of Night books, but I was wrong. Ah, heck, I did it one step up too close. Ah, it's fine. It's fine, I'm not mad about it. I don't know what I just put my hand in that was wet, but I did not vibe with it. Absolutely no mysterious wet substances on my watch. Alrighty, I think that's decorated enough for our second stats page. So, best book I read this month was Nestlings by Nat Cassidy, and the worst was Coup de Grace by Sophia Ajram. I didn't get any 5-star books this month, but I got 1 4-star, I got 3 3-stars, 1 2-star, and 1 1-star. So now we're gonna go ahead and do all of the like front pages of the book. I'm so worried it's gonna fall apart. It's living so far, but goodness gracious, it is, it's living on the edge. So for this first page, it's our book Battle 24. Based on my ratings, my best of the month was, focus, Nestlings. Can you even read that? It's so tiny. Hey-choo! Bless me. Lock in. I always think they're gonna be too small and then they're perfectly sized. So that completes that bracket. I'll fill in the rest when we're doing our end of year wrap up. But I can tell you, I already know who's getting knocked out of that bracket. Next up is our A to Z challenge page. I don't know if we got that many this month. I'm actually gonna have to start reading intentionally to try and get A to Z challenges. I think I've sort of hit the limit of what I can get naturally. So let's start with authors. Starting with an I, Washington Irving. We got an I! I know you'll love to see it, which means we completed the I bracket and we can put a little heart on it. I'm just gonna put Sleepy Hollow instead of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, because his first name and last name are quite long. Remember, I'm out of heart stickers, so I'm having to cut these out myself. And a little heart right there. I'm surprised I haven't gotten anybody with T. I thought I would have. Obviously nobody in X, Y, or Z. So that's it for the authors. Let's take a look at the titles. I don't think I got any this month. Oh, I got a Y, but that's next month. That's it. Only one entry this month in the A to Z challenge. So I still need, for titles, I'm actually more behind on titles than authors, I think. For titles, I need E, J, K, Q, U, V, X, Y, and Z. So if you have any recommendations, please let me know, because I do really want to fill those in. And for authors, I need L, O, Q, T, X. I think I might have to do X anywhere in their name. But if you know any authors whose last name begin with X, please recommend Y and Z. So we're getting close, but we might not make it if I'm not careful for November, December. Next, we have our medical examiners challenge. Let's speed through this one and I will give you guys the rundown. On this list, we have 23 deaths for Nestlings, 8 in Maidens, 11 in the Wolf Tree, 8 in A Botanical Daughter, 5 in We Used to Live Here, and 4 in Coup de Grace. Coup de Grace was difficult because it has multiple endings, so let's see. Do I actually have any for Decades Challenge? I don't think so, but let me check. I don't think so. Which means I'm officially behind on my Decades Challenge. I'm gonna have to catch up. I was supposed to do one a month, but it looks like we're at least a month behind, maybe 2 months behind, so I'm gonna have to catch up there. The one that I'm actually having trouble with is 2010s, because in theory, I can put a lot of things here because I've read books that were written in the 2010s and they were written to be contemporary. So I might just have to do that because 2010s is so recent. There's not a lot of books that are like, yeah, I'm set in 2012, you know? It's like I was published in 2015 and I'm set in the present day, so they would be set in 2015, but it's not explicitly said. So that's actually the one I'm struggling the most with. I have things on my TBR for the other 3 decades, but this one I might just have to put something and put it down. I don't know. We'll find out. I do have some stuff for this one. Let's see, I have The Maidens for Dumb Bitch Plays Detective because man, that bitch was dumb. And then I have Properly Sized All's Well for Professor Main Character. I figured I could just reprint it, which means I'm pretty close to being done with that Dark Academia challenge. I only have 2 left. There you go. Now you're properly sized. All is well, one might say. So the only ones I have left for this one are Let the Games Begin and a bonus, which is one of, it has to be a book that's referenced in another Dark Academia book. Oh God, this page is falling apart. This page is holding on for dear life. Next up, I think We Used to Live Here is gonna go somewhere on the horror subgenre challenge page, but I don't remember where I put it. I think I put it in Supernatural. Yeah, Supernatural. I read a lot of horror books in the month of October. I do log them over on Goodreads and Storygraph as I'm reading, and I post reviews there earlier than I post these. So if you want like my advanced thoughts. But next month, I should be filling in these 3 from just October alone. So I'm getting close to being able to finish this one too. I just need a Lovecraftian / cosmic style horror, which there's a few I can think of that I would put there. But I kind of want to read a dedicated one. And then also a dark fantasy. I don't read a lot of fantasy, so that'll be exciting. But yeah, I've filled these 3 slots. So I only have 2 left on that challenge and 2 left on this challenge. So we're nearing the end of our challenges, and I think we're gonna get a lot of them. Next up is book bingo. Let's see. Do I have anything that could be book bingoed? We Used to Live Here was it's being made into a Netflix TV series, and I think that counts. So I'm gonna put that one here. Legend of Sleepy Hollow might be on that list, but I'd have to check. Nothing like that, nothing like that. I think I might put Nestlings in Everyone Else Has Read It, because everybody was talking about how good that book was. And I thought it was just mid. I'm sorry. Ooh, bingo! Woohoo, yeah! Me in editing, put some confetti on the screen or something, I don't know. A little celebratory yay or something. Yeah, a little bingo on my book bingo. Now let's check my thrillers. I feel like I might be able to put We Used to Live Here on Paranormal Presence. I think that's fair. I'm aiming to fill up every slot in this one. I think we've got a double bingo, but I feel like we can get more. So let me know if you can fill in any of these slots with recommendations. So left on my regular book bingo is Set in a Dystopian Society, Blind Date with a Book, From 1001 Books to Read Before You Die, written by a celebrity, published in the year I was born. I should go back and check publishing dates. My free read, a memoir, Evil in the title, recommended by a friend, Pulitzer Award winner, Hugo Award winner, or color in the title. And then for the thriller bingo, I have Begins with a Disappearance, Cozy Mystery, highly recommended, part of a series, became a movie, inspired by true events, and Private Investigator. So I still have quite a few left on the bingos. Yes, this is my TBR page. I keep this one maintained on my own. Recommendations. I actually read Natural Beauty this month, so that's good. I do have a DNF, but it's a weird DNF. I DNF'd a Botanical Daughter, and you're like, how did you DNF that? You read it. It's because I DNF'd the audiobook. I think I DNF'd it at like 13%. Yes, book read. So I'll just fill this in. Enjoy this royalty-free lo-fi music. I think I am going to have to tape in another page here, which is pretty exciting for me because I am running out of space. So what I'm probably gonna do is tape in a page at the bottom that I can flip in and out, because I think I've already filled this page. I've read 10 books in October, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I'm out of space. So I'm gonna have to tape in a little extra page, which is exciting. I'll have to take it out of the back of the book. That's really cool that I've read this many books already and I'm gonna run out of space. I don't believe I read any new series, though I have heard rumors that We Used to Live Here might be getting a sequel. So if that's the case, I will read the sequel. I'm interested enough to read on in a series. I'm not a big series person, but I'm interested enough to read on and finally get another series in here other than House of Night. So that should be everything in the front of the book. We are gonna go to a little flip through of what we did today, and that will be all. Thank you so much for watching my September reading wrap-up. I'm sorry it got out to you so late. Life comes at you fast, and it came at me fast this past month. But thank you again so much for watching. If you've read any of the books that I talked about, please leave your opinions down in the comments below. If you liked this video, please be sure to leave me a like, and if you want to see more from me, subscribe. I'm uploading lots of videos in November, so hopefully I'll see you again very, very soon. Follow me on all my other social media. I am After Plague pretty much everywhere. That's Instagram, that's Threads, that's Goodreads, Storygraph, Twitch, and I'm After_Plague on Twitter. I have a shop. I'm coming out with some new products very, very soon, so mark your calendars for January 1st. I will be doing a full shop relaunch then. Currently on my shop are my books, and you can check them out at afterplagueart.myshopify.com, or the link is in the description. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you're reading some excellent books in this post-plague world. Bye!